My project makes use of two main functions. The first one being my visualization function, which sets up the visuals associated with my project and the user interface and callbacks that will collect data in order to feed it to my getForces function, which is my calculation function. Like I said, my function getForces takes the inputs from the visualization function from user interface and collected data. After making sure that the bridge is statically determinate, I then begin my while loop, which continues until each member force is known. Essentially, it will keep solving until there are enough known values to solve each set of force equations on each joint. My for loop loops through each joint that is on the bridge. I then evaluate each member that is connected to that joint. This is known as the method of joints in Truss analysis. After finding these members, I use my split members function, which splits these members into ones where the force is known and those where the force is unknown. I take those members that have known forces, split those forces up into their x components and their y components. So if we take a look at this function, I first start off by extracting the forces, and then I find the angle with horizontal that exists between each member, which will then help trigonometrically determine the x and y components. After I determine those x and y components, I must determine whether or not they are in the positive x and y direction or the negative x and y direction. This is determined by the relative location of the member to joint. It's important to note that compression and tension can indicate forces being applied in different directions depending on relative positions. So here I have a bunch of else if statements that are conditionally applied to each member, whether the member is in tension or compression, located above or below, or left or right from the joint being evaluated, and based on these criteria, the sign of the component of the force is then calculated. After I know the magnitude and sign of each component of the force, I add it to my x and y forces vectors, which are outputs of this function. I use these outputs and sum them together. Afterwards, I use a function called unknown angles. With this function, I've been able to generalize an algorithm that can be applied to each member, no matter its location, in order to find its angle with horizontal. My unknown forces function is a function in which the system of equations is solved. However, there must only be two or less unknowns in order for the system to be solved. I use a concept of net zero forces in each direction in order to generate these equations and solve them. I then update the forces on each member and add it to my output cell array of member forces. Once no unknown member forces remain, my output member forces is then fed into my visualization function where the animation and images appear.